Last time we spoke about depression, and we ended up with some statistics about the number of medications that we have for the terminal depression: 25 antidepressants, 12 augmenting strategies. There are more than that, but essentially you should remember only 12 of them. And then if you calculate, you are going to reach the conclusion that there are 25 times 12. That means 325 varieties of treatments that you can use in major depression. But then there are also four non-pharmacological approaches, which are ECT, TMS, VNS, DBS. So if you multiply that number by 4, you get 1,300 methods of treating depression, major depression. Actually, the number is higher because you can do combinations of medications. But if you do combination of antidepressants, make sure that they don't overlap. You don't use two antidepressants that have similar mechanisms of action. So try to make sure that they are complementary. Now, the antidepressants, there are 25 of them. I group them into, everybody groups them into SSRIs, SNRIs, norepinephrine, dopamine reuptake inhibitors, and there's only one actually, plus the postsynaptic serotonin enhancers, and I'll explain what that is, tricyclics and monoamine oxidase inhibitors. So these are the big groups. Now you remember that I talked about mnemonics as being an inferior way of remembering anything. If you talk about remembering ideas, if you talk about remembering names, it might be pretty much the only way. That means rote memorization and little trickeries like acrostics. For example, for the SSRIs, the acrostic is clever people find self-esteem with fluoxetine. So C for citalopram, P for Paxil, F for fluoxetine, fluvoxamine, S for sertraline, E for S-citalopram, and F for fluoxetine. I mean, fluoxetine is there. These are all the SSRIs. They have some properties which are which distinguish this class from the others. First of all, they supplanted the tricyclics. They just completely put them out of business. And why? Because number one, they are far safer, and as a psychiatrist, you should feel uncomfortable handing tricyclics to depressed people who often have some self-destructive thoughts. So it is not a good idea. Tricyclics, they do dissolve in the fatty tissue. They are very difficult to remove. They are very difficult to remove by dialysis, so it's a whole mess. And then on top of everything else, they affect the sodium channels, therefore they are epileptogenic and arrhythmogenic substances. That means you can get seizures and arrhythmias if you take them in high quantities. So they displaced all these antidepressants, all these tricyclics, the old-fashioned antidepressants. They are mostly very well tolerated, but they do have some very typical side effects. And these are probably, tremors, night sweats, vivid dreams, sexual side effects. Sexual side effects can be of four varieties: either desire, decreased desire, or inability to have an erection, inability to have an orgasm, or a combination of any of those. So you also have to remember that they do cause discontinuation reactions, and these discontinuation reactions are pretty mild. They consist of irritability, insomnia, and they reach a peak within 48 hours. They also run their course within 7 days. They don't happen automatically to just everybody. You have to just remember and avoid discontinuing anything in psychiatry abruptly, unless you replace it with an equivalent medication. The postsynaptic serotonin enhancers are trazodone and efazodone. The mixed ones, that means serotonin reuptake inhibitors plus postsynaptic serotonin enhancers, are the new ones, Trintellix and vortioxetine. Then you have the alpha antagonist, which is only one, mirtazapine. But it's very interesting to understand alpha antagonist is an alpha 2 antagonist. And alpha 2 are autoreceptors. That means if you antagonize or block the alpha 2 receptor, the neuron, upstream neuron, doesn't know that it already produced or issued a lot of norepinephrine in the synaptic cleft, and therefore it loses track. It continues to flood the synapse with norepinephrine, and that's the mechanism of mirtazapine. Then we have the yeah, but how am I going to get them here? So I made a mistake. But it's going to be very, very short until I get to the main course. So the Trintalix and the the Trintalix and Vibrate. These are two of the more modern ones. Oh, I was actually speaking about the mirtazapine. Then we have the mixed serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, and these are veterans demonstrate the durability of leadership. So veterans demonstrate the durability of leadership. That means V for venlafaxine, D for desvenlafaxine, L leadership, L for levomilnacipran, and the other D is for duloxetine. Then we have the mixed serotonin dopamine reuptake inhibitors, and that is only one, bupropion. And finally, the monoamine oxidase inhibitors, which are global. They affect all the monoamines. Monoamines means serotonin plus the catecholamine, and the catecholamine are two of them: adrenaline and noradrenaline. Sorry, there are actually three: noradrenaline, adrenaline, and dopamine. So this you remember with isomers transform pharmacology. That means I for isocarboxazid, T for tranylcypromine, and P for phenelzine. Okay, let me tell you something briefly about the tricyclics. The acrostic for that is: I am aspiring to close permanently the notorious revolving door of depression. And anyway, I don't like to remember it like this. I like to remember it as IMI, NOR, and TRIMI. And that means imipramine, norpramine, trimipramine. So IMI, NOR, PRIMI. The other one, the triptylines, are nortriptyline, amitriptyline, and protriptyline. That means ami, pro, nor, or amri, nor, pro. And you have to remember two more, which are maprotilene and doxepin. Doxepin still survives. Maprotilene died of honest death. That means lack of interest. No scandal, no nothing, just lack of interest. And the generic people, they just stop producing it since they don't sell the product. So doxepin has a new lease on life. Is called now Silanor. It's a sleeping medication. The dose for sleep is 4 to 8 milligrams. Doxepin as a antidepressant needs anywhere between 150 to 300 milligrams. Okay, so I am going to mention the monoamine oxidase inhibitors because they have kind of a colorful history. First of all, believe it or not, they were the first antidepressants discovered. Actually, Hoffman LaRoche in the end of 1940s, beginning of 1950s, came up with isonicotinyl hydrazide, and this is isoniazide, and that was an anti-TB medication. But the people who used it, the clinician who used it in people with TB, they noticed that it has antidepressant properties. So they came up with a specific medication for depression that was iproniazide. They discovered in 1952 or 1957 was ready for the use in clinical setting. And shortly after, imipramine came on the market. It's a little bit the story like MySpace versus Facebook. That means iproniazide generated a family of substances that pretty much are relinquished to the footnote of history in psychiatry. They are very rarely used, although very effective, but rarely used because they have a ton of interactions. Now, to remind you, these monoamine oxidase inhibitors, they destroy the serotonin and the dopamine too. If you block these enzymes, the monoamine oxidase, if you block the monoamine oxidase, you are going to stop the catabolism of these neuromediators. Therefore, you are going to have an accumulation of those in the synapse. Therefore, a higher level of activity of these neuromediators. There are two kinds, monoamine oxidase A and B. So A is specific, deteriorates or catabolizes specifically serotonin. The B catabolizes specifically PEA, phenylethylalanine. So phenylethylamine, PEA. And both of them catabolize the dopamine and tryptamine and tyramine. So that is where the classic of these monoamine oxidase inhibitors comes into play. These tyramine and tryptamine are actually amino acids that are contained in some foods. And the intestine has a strong representation of monoamine oxidase A and B, and therefore they are like guardians. They don't allow tryptamine into the circulation. It destroys it on the spot. But if you block this guardian, then you are going to have a tryptamine flooding your system if you eat something containing tryptamine, and that is mostly cheese. Blue cheese, but other substances, well, red wine typically, and chocolate. So if you have this tryptamine in your system, what this little amino acid will do will be mistaken for norepinephrine and taken into the neuron, and there it causes mayhem. It causes the upstream neuron to start flooding, releasing norepinephrine in large quantities, and you have a hypertensive crisis. So in order to avoid that, people who take monoamine oxidase inhibitors have to follow a very strict diet. That's one pain in the neck. And another pain in the neck is that it doesn't go along with any other antidepressant. In fact, you need a 2-week washout of any antidepressant, especially the serotonin enhancers. So actually, they have almost an historical significance, these monoamine oxidase inhibitors, because you rarely see them. In 25 years in psychiatry, maybe I could count for about 10 or 15 patients, and I treated thousands of patients. So 10 or 15 patients on this medication. It's very risky and very complicated, and the dietary requirements scare a lot of people when you tell them. Even if you go to a restaurant and you eat, let's say, a dessert that has red wine in it, and you have no clue and you have no way to know it, you end up in the emergency room. Actually, the people who are on monoamine oxidase inhibitors will go around with a pill of prazosin in their wallet, or wherever they can put it, they want to put it, because of these situations. You eat something that you don't know what it contains, and instead of rushing to emergency room, you can just put a prazosin under the tongue, but you still have to go to the emergency room, at least not in a kind of a high emergency situation. Okay, so let's see. You know what? We will go straight to the next part of the presentation, and this one is going to be much more interesting because it contains some nice colorful images. So I didn't put the transition there. I don't know how the hell. You see, I'm doing this thing on Keynote, and then I put it on PowerPoint, and this is this little weird stuff that is happening. But anyway, I always do that because I would like you to actually retain something. Last time we talked about depression. This is the summary. We talked about the learning strategies, the low quality ones. And again, low quality ones is when you try to use your time efficiently and you try to retain ideas, not words. Rote learning, method of loci, mnemonics, highlighting, summarization, or conspectus method, not that efficient use of your time. Then you have medium yield, interleave practice. That means alternate anatomy, physiology, or diagnostic therapy. You have to interleave. You have to kind of change gears to make your brain absorb information a little more efficiently. Self-explanation. That means imagine that you are doing what I'm doing and talk to yourself and present yourself a topic. Elaborative interrogation. I'm going to maybe kind of squeeze some some words about this, not now, but there is actually a whole science about how to ask questions, believe it or not. In education, the people who are studying education as a process, they have a whole philosophy about what can you ask. So for example, now you are sitting there, is not much in your mind except for the sounds that are coming through your ear, but actually is a little bit passive and is not going to is not going to absorb much information. But if you all the time you ask yourself questions, even if you get no answers, actually you are going to retain more. So of course, the winners are distributed practice instead of 8 hours a day. One day, you should do 1 hour per day, 8 days in a row. And finally, practice testing. Forget about the lofty ideas of understanding medicine. You have to actually test yourself, test your knowledge exactly how other people are testing you. That means multiple choice. So we saw this stuff. Let's go to today. The definition, start with definition of TRD, very important because you know what is TRD, treatment-resistant depression. We can define it in many ways. Then we'll talk about how to resolve it. Now, this is the way it's defined. It's going to be either one non-response, one failure or failure to respond to one antidepressant or failure to respond to two antidepressants. I'll show you later that the psilocybin studies has not one, not two, not three, but four failed treatments. So, and this should be proper treatments. Proper means medication that is kept in place for at least 4 to 6 weeks, and it is at the maximum dose or the maximum tolerated dose. So that's the standard. You cannot come to as a patient and say, I took Prozac 10 milligrams for 2 weeks and it didn't do anything. I was so disappointed. I'm not going to do it anymore. It's just a waste of time. You have to remember to tell them nicely and patiently, it's not the way it goes. You are going to need time, and also you need to be on the maximum dose or the maximum dose that you can tolerate. And don't forget that you have to know the maximum dose because they are going to ask you. For Prozac, it happens to be 80. Depending on what source do you read. Other people say 40, but I prefer 80. It's safe to go up to there. So, and by the way, whenever you talk with people, you have to remember that you have to present options. I call the style of practice SDM, not me, I didn't invent it, SDM, shared decision making. That means you generate options, including the option to walk away without putting any pressure on people, without insinuating that you are going to be mad at them. You just put those in front of them, present the pros and cons, and let them decide. So therefore, you have to actually use nicely the low effectiveness method that I just mentioned, rote memorization, and you have to recite the 25 antidepressants, exactly how you do the warm-up when you start your day or when you want to go into a race, you have to recite the 25. And I would say that you should get so good that you recite all the medications, and you do it very fast. But don't forget that you can't recite 113 distinct substances that we use in psychiatry. That's not possible unless you divide them into groups. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to finish what you said.
Oh, yeah, so I was saying, don't forget 113 names, and you're not going to kind of be fixed in the memory unless you divide it into neuroleptics, anti-anxiety, antidepressants. Antidepressants, you divide it into subcategories. So that's the rote memorization. You will need that. Yes, go ahead.
I'm just curious, before we move on to treatment-resistant depression, you've treated thousands of patients. Are there medications that you've noticed that you consider, forgetting studies, more effective than others?
You know why I like this question is because it gives me the opportunity to express a thought that I have and I held very strongly, and is not shared by anybody. I mean, not consciously shared. I'm sure that other people think it. There is no star among antidepressants. Some people say, give me the good stuff, good stuff. There is no good stuff. It's if you imagine a big circle and smaller circles inside, each antidepressant has a small circle inside the bigger circle of representing the patients with depression. These smaller circles are equal. All of them are equal, but they are not in the same place. They don't overlap. And that's why they might say, well, if all the antidepressants are kind of 70% effective, I don't like those odds. And you have to tell them, look, 70% is for one antidepressant, but another antidepressant will capture another subset of the number of depressed patients. So it makes sense to move to another one. You're not going to just waste your time. So that's why have in mind this image of a circle, which is represent the totality of depressed people, and then smaller circles inside, which represent the number of people who respond to a certain medication. And these circles are equal, but they are not overlapping. So in principle, you can get much more than 70% response rate if you move from one antidepressant to the other. And of course, the other method that we are going to discuss, adding something that in itself is not an antidepressant, but that means that if you use it alone, you are not going to go anywhere. So you have to add it to an antidepressant. And that is an augmenting strategy. So if you consider that one, you kind of enlarge the 70% to much more than that. But there is going to be always a core. Did I see it in 25 years? Yes. 3, 4 maybe. And I'm not talking about people who come, are disappointed, and disappear. I'm not talking about those, because I don't consider those treatment resistant. But I had 3 or 4 patients who seem to, they defeat everything that you throw at them. And some of them had ECT, TMS, ketamine. But I have a patient now who is at the level of VNS. He would not accept DBS because it's a little scary, inserting electrodes, and I never understood that. Hey, if you are suicidal, what's your point that you are afraid of needles into the brain? I don't get it, but you have to respect that. But he is at the level of VNS, and I don't know if I mentioned that the VNS is done, but they are done by neurosurgeons who do this on a routine basis for Parkinson. And some of them, and I managed to discover a neurosurgeon that is familiar with the VNS in the treatment of depression. He is in Colombia. And he said, no problem, but you have to understand that it's $100,000. So, and only Medicare actually pays without mumbling. The other managed care, I have no idea. Probably they don't. But, at least you have something to put in front of the patient. And if they are really desperate, who knows? They might get a loan, do something. So this is a treatment-resistant depression. Usually the second, the B definition, is the widest. 2 failed antidepressants, but properly conducted. Yeah, so that's very important. So STAR D. STAR D, sequence treatment alternative to relieve depression. Big landmark study. 35 million. Started 2004 was just enrollment. It stretched for much more than that. It generated 120 papers and included 4,034 patients strewn over 23 clinics and 19 primary care facilities. So what is the characteristic of STAR D? They wanted to be very inclusive because they wanted to make their knowledge very usable. So not some kind of pie in the sky academic exercise. So the exclusion criteria very little. They did not blind anybody. Anybody knew what they take. And the outcome measure was remission. So now is the point to make a distinction, because it's very useful for you to have this distinction: remission, response, and statistical difference. So remission means no symptoms, or no more than 2 remaining symptoms, or a Hamilton Depression Rating Scale which is less than 7. So this is remission. It's gone. It's not there. Well, it's not cured. It's not. You can't call it cure. There is cure in psychiatry, but in depression is only if you had only 1 episode. And the duration of the time that you need to be free of symptoms because you are declared cured is nowhere specified. I kind of steal from oncology and I say 5 years. But before that, you cannot say that you are cured. You are in remission. So response means 50% reduction of the initial score on Hamilton Depression Scale. So 50% reduction of the symptoms. And statistical difference means statistical difference. I mean, it doesn't really matter how much it declines if it's statistically different. And guess what? All the antidepressants show statistical difference compared with placebo. So that's how it goes. That's how the industry goes. They don't have to demonstrate remission, response. They have to demonstrate statistical difference. Pretty weak, in my opinion, but obviously it's better than just going blindly, throwing molecules around. And by the way, people are going to start mumbling. It's like, you know what, I don't come to you to tell me what is statistically different because, you know, I want to know if you can make me good. And you can tell them, no, I cannot promise you to make you good. I can promise you what the science knows. Don't overpromise, don't, but again, you have to be sure how you say it. For example, I always make the analogy going, well, that's not a very good analogy if I think about this, but I do use it. If you enter in a casino, and someone tells you, you can go to that slot machine that pays in 1 in 10,000, or you can go to that slot machine that it pays 1 in 500. What are you going to do? Are you going to still say, oh, I don't need your advice? It's your advice is worth nothing to me. I think that advice is worth a lot. So if someone really starts kind of splitting hairs with you, patients, then you have to know how to react to that. So, and that convinces everybody. They understand that, yes, it's better than going out there and trying stuff like marijuana and alcohol is going to be kind of doomed to fail. Okay, so let's see. This is the first step, the first level. People were put on citalopram, and those who did not respond were switched to either buspirone, to sertraline, or venlafaxine. And these are the results. So this is level 2. So after the people who were treated with escitalopram did not respond, and actually they were, the remission rate for the citalopram was 36%. 36%. Meager, but again, we're talking about remission, which is strong. So those who did not go into remission, they were switched to any of these, buspirone, sertraline, and venlafaxine, and the results were equal. So it doesn't really matter to what you switch them to. They are going to be, all of them, okay. That means you are going to get another 25% to go into remission. So 25% out of the people who did not respond. So let's imagine that you start with 100. They didn't start with 100. They started with 4,034. But let's say that you take 100 because it's easier for you to imagine this. You take 100, 33%, did I say? 36 out of 100, you take them out, and you are left with 64. And out of those 64, another 25% will go into remission. And that 25% represents something like another 14. So you had 36 initially plus another 14. And then you do, okay, the first question, would you say, that the switch to citalopram to another drug in level 2 is translatable to a switch between any other SSRI? Yeah, that's a good question. So again, the good questions is like when I feel that they give me the opportunity to say something that it was always on my mind. So, who knows? So do not forget, you are swimming in an ocean of unknown, and we have a little bit of kind of strands of certainty, which are these studies. Whether you can extrapolate this and you go to another antidepressant and say, well, why, if you start with something else? Let's start with, let's say, mirtazapine. Is it going to still be valid? 36 out of 100 will go into remission. I don't know, but I think that the extrapolation is in a way worth doing because there's nothing else that you can do. So yes, you use that information. Actually, I don't bullshit patients. I just tell them how it is. If they ask me this question, I tell them, no, I don't know if this is valid for mirtazapine or Effexor, if that is the first antidepressant. But as we have nothing, I think that it's safe to use that information than not to use anything. So you see, that's my view about this. Okay, so let's see. We were with the count 36 at the first level, another 15 at the second level, another 14 at the second level. So we are at this point at what, 40, something around 40. How many do you say? 50, 50, that's right. Okay, so now level 3. So go to level 3. Where is level 3? No. Um, Okay, so the level 3. So you take those people who did not respond to level 1, level 2, and you again put them on the third antidepressant. And that third antidepressant, they decided to be mirtazapine or nortriptyline. And again, the results were the same. That means both of them perform okay. Not okay, didn't perform okay, but they perform identical. And they squeezed another 10% of what was left. So 10%, and that was 10% out of remaining, which was, I think, 36 or something, 34, and that is going to be another five patients. So you get another 5 patients. So altogether, in 3 levels, like a sieve, is a kind of sorts out the people who are really resistant. You get 55 out of the race, out of 100. So 55 are in remission and you are good, but there are going to be 45 left. So now you're going to say, well, this kind of a pretty meager harvest for your efforts after 3 levels. Now, let me see. Oh, yeah, that's right. So let me mention to you because we are talking about switching. How do you switch? Again, no recipe. Everybody is doing whatever they feel like it. From my 25 years experience, the switching should go like this: 20 to 25% down from the old one every week. And again, 20 to 25% is going to be according to what you have, because what you can work with. These people are doing strengths of a variety of calibers, and you just have to use what you have. So 20 to 25% down every week. That means it will take you 4 weeks to get rid of the first one. In the same time, you introduce the second one. And the second one, very simple. You introduce it at half of the minimum dose. In the situations in which you can do that, because the antidepressants will come as a capsule. So there you have no choice. You have to use the minimum strength. So the minimum strength in which the medication comes. And you raise it after 2 weeks to double that. You double it after 2 weeks. So that's my way of approaching this. You might come up with others. Abrupt transition can be done only with medications that are similar in mechanism of action. That means SSRI to SSRI or SNRI to SNRI. But it's kind of risky, and you risk discrediting yourself in front of the patient because it's going to be rough. So I don't really do it. So if you want, you are a little bit more, courageous, and you want to take some risk, you may want to do that, but again, I don't do it. And the washout period is not needed except for monoamine oxidase inhibitors. So people are a little bit surprised. It's like, well, do you mean that I should start already the new one? Absolutely. That's why we call it cross tapering. We just decrease one and we increase the other. Okay, so now, another thing that you have to be aware of is like how do you compare antidepressants to each other? Because opioids and benzodiazepines, they have equivalency tables. So that's kind of through studies, and that's the right way to do it. They established what is the equivalence between products. When it comes to the rest, there is no such a thing. And what you can do is like this. You consider 0 the minimum dose that is in the therapeutic range. The minimum dose is considered 0%. And then you consider the maximum dose 100%. So you have an interval of 0 to 100. And now you compare with the 0 to 100 interval of another medication. So for example, if you have let's say escitalopram, Lexapro, which is 5 to 20. Then you want to transition, let's say, sexual side effects, and you want to say, well, let's go to Wellbutrin. Wellbutrin has a range of 100 to 450. So how are you going to know what is the equivalent of 10 milligrams of Lexapro? So you see, it's kind of a little bit of a problem. But if you think 10 milligrams of Lexapro is actually 33% of the interval, Then you go to the Wellbutrin, and you know that it's 100 to 450, and you wonder what is 33% of that interval. So, and it's going to be 350 divided by 3, so it's kind of 100 to 150. Well, actually, it cannot be 150. It must be 100. Yeah, it must be 150. So around 150. So roughly, you know that if you come from an antidepressant that was 33% through its interval, then you go to the new one, you might get this equivalent result with 33% of that interval. But again, it's completely non-scientific. At least you have some kind of guidance to know what you can expect. Because again, unless you have someone putting the money and the time and an effort to actually clinically determine these equivalencies, you are not going to know. So let's see now. Let's start 3. Let me see. Oh yeah, that's right. That's an important slide. It's we are going to augmenting now. So forget about switching. We are going to go to augmenting. So these are two classic, two heavyweights in augmentation: lithium and thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone is almost dropped, and I don't really know why, because T3 actually performed better than lithium. And there are some naysayers who are saying that lithium doesn't augment anything. Actually, lithium helps only the people who are covered bipolar. And that's why it creates the appearance of improving depression, but actually they improve only those who have a bipolar illness. And this is the study on which this idea is based. That means this study did the same. They took treatment-resistant patients and they put them on, they added lithium to it, but what they did is very smart. They weeded out everybody who had even a hint of suspicion that they suffer of bipolar illness. And in that circumstance, it didn't differentiate from placebo. Very interesting. Yes, go ahead. This one, it was nortriptyline. The previous one? Oh, I see. What were they on? What are they augmenting? In that one was citalopram. That's right. That's right. So citalopram. That's right. That's right. So actually, I will refer to this idea. Is like, you know what? Which one is better, to switch, or to increase, or to augment? And I'll have a slide about that. So yes. Oh, that would be a nice subject of research. Why does T3 augment? I don't know. Lithium? I don't know. And not because I didn't try to find out. So it's just not clear, actually, why do these medications augment. But I would submit to you that T3 is kind of a little bit of a, how do you call it, hidden gem. Because T3 is effective. Oh, by the way, the dose has to be 5 to 25 micrograms. So this is not a big dose. 5 to 25. Oh, is it there by any chance? No. So practically it's a small dose. And as far as we know, there is no suppression of the thyroid because you give this supplement. Because people are nervous when you're saying, based on the model of prednisone, you're kind of always nervous, I'm going to mess up the endocrine status of this patient. It seems that no, if you use it 5 to 25, it's not going to happen. And don't forget that lithium really destroys the thyroid. Not immediately, but if you are unlucky and you stay on the lithium for 5-7 years, you do have a high chance that to destroy your thyroid and end up on Synthroid for the rest of your life. So that's why you have to put that in the mind of the patients if they express any concern. Oh, how long does it? Yeah, what's the time to develop hypothyroidism or lithium? I don't have this information, but I know for sure that is a question of years and definitely over 5. So, and also do not forget, it has to be told. Not everybody will experience hypothyroidism. That's occasionally it does happen. I don't know the percentage, but it's a pretty high percentage. I would say that after 5 years, in my own gut feeling, after 5 years on lithium, the percentage is kind of 10%. And if you put them on 15 years of lithium, then the percentage goes to 25%. So that's kind of rough from my own kind of observation, which is the least reliable way of understanding this phenomenon of thyroid suppression. So we are going into augmentation. So augmentation, don't forget, the augmenting medication cannot be an antidepressant because that is going to be a combination of antidepressants. It's not an augmentation. And second, it's a medication that has this property that if you add it to an antidepressant, will drop your Hamilton depression scale. So that's the only criteria. So this one is uh, the um, the augmentation with buspirone. I put it here because it's a very interesting phenomenon, this buspar. Buspar is kind of a classic, and it's in psychiatry used only for generalized anxiety disorder. It's considered a weakling, not really a powerful medication, but still differentiates itself from placebo, has an FDA blessing, so it's there. When you augment it, the people with depression don't seem to budge. They still say the same. So why is even discussed? It's because if you look at the people who are severely depressed, the MADRS score of 30 or above, those they seem to benefit. So it seems to be very good for people who are severely depressed. Now you're going to say, what about the rest? Well, this is a little workaround. Add melatonin, and the study that's kind of an independent study. It's a study by Nirenberg in 2003. No, it's not Nirenberg actually. Um, it is uh, it is Appleberg, Appleberg in 2001. So so anyway, this is. The way it goes. If you add 3 milligrams, a tiny little dose, to Buspar, you're going to catch also the people who are moderately depressed, not just severely depressed. The next one is going to be Vyvanse. Oh, sorry, Vyvanse. Yeah, Vyvanse. Stimulants in general. I mentioned them because to spare you some time. It doesn't work. Simple as that. If you want to address something else, that's fine, but don't waste your time and waste the patient's time creating expectations that is going to attack the core problems in depression. It doesn't. So, and again, you might say, what about the others? Well, I don't know. I'm extrapolating. I think that these things were studied. I think that there are some other stimulants used. Ritalin, I'm sure it has been studied, and I think that it's the same story. It just ends up not differentiating itself from placebo. The people report the same level of depression. Maybe they feel more alert, but it's the core issues are really there. Okay, so now it's going to be about modafinil, another medication that didn't work, but I still mentioned it because it's the study was included a few people actually. So if you really want to use something that keep people awake and makes them more lively, then you want to use modafinil because although the study in 2007 did not prove significant statistical significance, the number of was small, and there is a suspicion that it might be something there. Another interesting one is the pramipexole. Pramipexole is a D2, D3, and D4 stimulant. That is, this molecule called pramipexole latches onto those receptors and stimulates them the same as dopamine. And as I said before, in principle, the monoamine theory of depression, that means depression is caused by some deficit of serotonin or norepinephrine or dopamine or a combination thereof, doesn't seem to help pramipexole in its effort to treat depression. It doesn't work alone, but it does work as an augmenting medication. Um, I was not idle. That's right. That's right. Augmentation. So we talked about lithium synthroid. We talked about Buspar with melatonin. We talked about pramipexole. They were all, some of them clearly effective. We talked about stimulants. Some of them mentioned because they don't work, others that because they work, but they are promising, or you must tweak with them. Now these are kind of much more solid into the range of acceptable, reasonable. So this one here is for aripiprazole. There are two studies, and you see how they differentiate themselves from placebo, even from week 9. They continue, the differentiation continue to widen as the time goes by. So the study was done in 2008. It was uh, again focused on statistical difference and not on remission or response. So, and by the way, Abilify has the FDA approval to be used for as an augmenting medication. Now, the next one is going to be the quetiapine, a rather strong option. Abilify, quetiapine, and these are cheap medications, and therefore it's good to keep them in mind. It also differentiated itself from a placebo. They used a MADRS score. And they also, this study is like, it looks pretty narrow, but actually statistical significance is here, and it's pretty solid. So even if it looks narrow on the graph, usually the people like to kind of exaggerate and make the y-axis wider to make the difference appear spectacular, but they didn't. And they also, I like this study because they used the last observation carried forward. And what does it mean? A patient dropped here, then they are going to consider the last observation, drop for any kind of reason, the last observation that was on their record here, they move it all the way at the 6th week. And you can imagine, you don't know what happened with the patient. He might have gotten even much better, but he just didn't show up. So it's a little bit being more honest and making it harder for them to prove statistical difference. So next one is going to be brexiprazole. Brexiprazole, very promising. This is a medication that will help quite a bit. It has an FDA approval for the use as an augmenting medication in major depressive disorder. They also used no, so these people they didn't actually use, but they use some other kind of nice methods. They use a questionnaire called antidepressant treatment history response questionnaire. So they selected people based on how bad their lack of response to antidepressant was. So they chose, let's say, kind of more hardcore non-responders. And they use some fancy statistical analysis, multi-level modeling for repeated measures. That's a kind of a statistical approach that makes it even harder to demonstrate statistical difference, but they came up very well. The 3 stars there are actually a p-value of 0.001, and 0.05 is actually enough to gain credibility for what you are trying to prove. So brexiprazole, but unfortunately it's already in the brand name area, and therefore expensive, and it will be fought like crazy by the managed care. So then we have cariprazine, very elegant drug. The brexiprazole, Rexulti, is unfortunately heavy with weight gain. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult to convince people to be on it if you are honest and you tell them about the risk of weight gain. Cariprazine is equally impressive, and it doesn't cause problems with the metabolics. No weight gain, different than placebo. No elevations of cholesterol, no elevations of blood sugar. And you might say, why is it in the kind of the umbrella of concern? Well, because you know how it is. That's the FDA regulation. If you prove from 1 to for 2, for 3, for 4 medications in a group, then you just slap the warning for everybody in that group. This is a very interesting study that will make you remember something very important. You have a person on 20 milligrams of fluoxetine, did not respond. What do you do next? So you either change, or you augment, or you just increase the dose. Is that right? So these are the 3 options. You increase the dose, you change, or you add something to it to make it stronger. Well, it seems that, oh, wait a minute, the medication that was used, yeah, there was fluoxetine, that's right. So it seems that increasing the dose is really the most effective way. So all of them worked, all of them were fine, but this one, increasing the dose, good old increasing the dose, is the one that won the day. So don't complicate the matters. If the patient tolerates what he has and he's not really good, then you just increase the medication until three things happen. He gets better, or you reach you reach the maximum of his tolerance. That means you reach as much as he can tolerate, or you reach the maximum dose, which for Prozac is all the way up to 80. Some people say 40, but 40 I would say for adolescents should be the maximum dose. For adults should be really 80. This is how it looks like the whole chart of augmenting strategies. Uh, okay, so yeah, this thing picked up on all the, yeah. So this thing picked up on all the thing, but it really excluded them. Oh yeah, that's a very nice overview of everything. The question is that assuming at least a minimal response to low dose fluoxetine? No, it's really no matter what happens. If the patient says, I don't have any hint of response, it's still going to be the same. Because if it's a hint of response, it's going to be much easier. It gives you more confidence to continue. But no, it's if the patient says nothing, it's not happening anything, I don't feel anything. And you have to tell them, again, you put the ball in their court and say, at this point, we have the option two, increase, add, or replace. And then you tell them, according to the studies, and you have to be honest if he's on another antidepressant, you tell them, well, it was a study involving fluoxetine. Does it mean that your venlafaxine will behave the same? You have to tell them, we don't know. But if we have no other way, no other information to go about, I think it's safe to go by this study. So increasing is pretty much the way to go. So let's continue very briefly with esketamine, because it's a very important thing. So esketamine is a very crazy medication. It's an NMDA blocker. So now you might say, and what does the NMDA? Well, NMDA is an excitatory amino, I don't know if it's classified as amino acid, neurotransmitter, which is involved in long-term learning. So long-term potentiation, let's put it this way. You have a molecule of NMDA who stimulates in the same time two receptors. One of them is going to be the NMDA receptor, and another one, the AMPA receptor. And when the AMPA receptor is stimulated, it allows some sodium ions to seep into the cell and depolarizes a little bit the membrane around that place. And in that moment, this other thing, the main NMDA receptor, triggers the signals. So what happens as a result of that, the AMPA receptors, as you see in the third part, they become more and more numerous. So that's how that thing is potentiated. So the next time around, when NMDA is around, then it will have more AMPA receptors, more depolarization, and the response is going to be faster and more intense. So esketamine, actually what it does, it blocks the NMDA receptors. So you might say, well, if it blocks the MDMA receptors, how is that going to kind of help depression? Well, it seems that the NMDA, aside from kind of long-term potentiation, which is the basis of learning, also has to do with the trophicity, with the health of the neuron. It just makes the neuron stronger with more synapses. And if you block the NMDA receptor, you create like a dam. You create this glutamate molecules that come and try to get to the receptor. But the esketamine is there for 5-10 minutes. And when this thing is removed, because it's catabolized, is removed, then you have a rebound of glutamine. It kind of rushes into there, and the neuron is kind of wakes up. And in the process, it also produces some BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which lead to the strengthening of the neuron. That means you see it under the microscope. When before in depression, the prefrontal lobe, the neurons are very smooth, lean. You look at them and you see that they are like worms. When you put this esketamine in the picture for a while, then they look like hedgehogs. They kind of start spiking all sorts of ramifications. So this is esketamine, very strong drug, a very reliable drug. Okay, so let me see maybe.
My name's Kurt Rutter, and I was fortunate enough
On
to
hallucinogen.
be a participant in the Imperial College study of treatment-resistant depression with psilocybin. Later that year, in 2011, from the spring, my mother passed away in October, and really hit me like a ton of bricks. Almost in a day, I found out that my partner had been having an affair with a friend of mine. From being kind of, absolutely kind of pretty darn good in 2011, things have changed quite a bit by the time I got to the Imperial College London. The pregabalin and the amitriptyline, a colleague actually said to me at work, "What the hell's wrong with you?" Because I was kind of drooping a bit. It kind of knocked me out a bit, made me kind of quite. And when it came to talking about a painful, some of the pain around, especially around my mother's death, I shut it down. When it came to the 10 milligram, it was quite psychedelic. I saw kind of these dual structures. It started off with like a Sanskrit kind of letter or something being written in light, and then it would trail away, and then it would come in again and then fade. I had the 25 milligram session, and again, I was nervous, very nervous about doing this because I felt that it would be that much stronger, and I had no experience with psilocybin before. So I think just that, having a break from that headspace and being in a beautiful space, having this lovely music with kind, loving people either side of you was almost a 360 degree kind of, 180 degree kind of turn from where I was when I arrived and I showed up to this place. I was holding on to the wrong thing. I was holding on to the grief and not the memories. And I felt that letting go of the grief was a betrayal. I always say it was like a feeling of being in a stuffy room and someone opening the window up. There was like a breeze kind of coming through. It felt like, a change. And I think I'd been worrying up to that point that it wasn't going to help. I thought, well, I'm going to be one of the people that this doesn't work for, and that wasn't the case. I mean, for me, it was a very pleasant experience, and it helped.
So, well, this is going to be a challenge. This is, first of all, 4 failed antidepressants, very kind of strong core of non-responders. This is the QIDS questionnaire for intensity of depressive symptoms, something like that. QIDS before, QIDS, what is it, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and this one is 3 months. So this is the decrease in the QIDS score, and it's an English study. They have kind of different stuff there. What's that?
What did they use as a control?
No control. No. So that's the catch. That's right. That's a little bit of a catch there. But so that was a decrease. And by the way, it's a little different. You don't just give people psilocybin and you send them home. Actually, you give them 10 milligrams. Then you call them for a therapy session, and then in a week you do with 25 and the therapy session. Because without the therapy session, I don't know if people what would no, nobody tried it without the therapy session actually. So again, this is not this is just for information. I'm not saying that psilocybin is anywhere near use. Timothy Leary tried to kind of break these psychedelics into the practice of psychiatry, but he was completely banished. He was kind of really lost control. I mean, he just started advocating for all the drugs, marijuana including. But very interesting development. And a very interesting thing, FDA opened the studies for psilocybin. This is England, but then there are for about 3 more in Stanford, in NYU, and all kind of say the same thing. What's that? You are aware of that? Oh, I see. Well, so you know what? I hate drugs. I always tell people it's the dumbest thing that you can do, including the alcohol and including the marijuana. I don't give a damn that they are legal or not. But the psychedelics are actually not addictive. And second, if they have any use, I don't really care. If they can help a person with 5 failed antidepressant treatments, I have 2 of them that keep me awake at night. So it would be nice to have something so simple. But don't forget that in that study, you know how long it did last? The administration, 9 hours. So they invite, they talk, they put them into a room, they make them familiar, they explain. So 9 hours from the beginning to the end. How is that going to happen here? I have no idea, because managed care is going nervous if you bill more than 15 minutes. So it's still kind of a big issue.
Oregon.
Was that?
There
Really?
centers in Oregon. I think in a few years they'll have them set up.
Wow, in the United States, and that means for people to walk in?
Trials now. I mean, the question still remains whether it's the psychedelics that are working or it's the associated therapy, like you just said. But I think clinically it doesn't really matter, right? Like for research purposes, it does matter.
Oh, I can tell you
Because
when
if
you are
you're paying for it, then and it's going to be an expensive session. It's like 8 hours, 9 hours. You're going to
Yeah.
spend somewhere,
Hmm.
and that's the next hit thing.
And I think they're charging training is something
Yeah.
like $20,000.
It's very,
So
very
it's
expensive.
completely
Yeah.
inaccessible.
Yep. Yeah, it's only going to be accessible to very specific people.
Yeah. I'm saying even having people trained in it is going to be nearly inaccessible because the training for the courses that the state of Oregon wants to put out are $20,000 a person.
Yeah, they do that here. I can do it at Yale too. It's not that expensive. I guess that's a lot of good things.
That's like a special psilocybin training course that in Oregon would, to be able to treat those patients.
And then what about the legality of things? What can you face if, as a psychiatrist, you use psilocybin? That's kind of another big one. And it's specific to the states, I guess. Oregon may have some kind of loophole.
They legalize everything basically.
Really?
Oregon?
Oregon?
That's how
Wow,
they
that's
started.
interesting. Well, they know that I wish they wouldn't, but the hallucinogens, and I don't care about ayahuasca and ibogaine because there were people who died of that. But LSD, psilocybin, well, they're kind of on the table. But what are you going to do? You are going to face jail every time when you use this. And if you are many years in practice, you are going to run into these people who are desperate. And you are desperate too, because you know that everything you throw at them, nothing. And they are still suicidal. They are out there. You can get a call any moment. So in that kind of situation, no, excuse me, I would like to have something like that, which is so simple. Because if you talk about $100,000, treatment, many people will drop out, and wires into the body and stuff like that. It's not going to be pleasant. So, but it was also a very interesting kind of little detail in England. They were illegal. That means you can go and buy them from the store. But again, I don't know for sure. How does the medical community uses that psilocybin, and if they use it at all, actually. But anyway, don't forget, these are ultra treatment resistant, and you are going to see them at the rate of 1 every 5 years. Because again, 1,300 distinct methods, well, forget about VNS and DMS. Let's say you multiply 325 by 2, because there's TMS and ECT, which are perfectly accessible. So that will make it 750. So I haven't had any patient who was on more than 10 antidepressants, and they say, I tried everything under the sun. I say, no, is really kind of, are you sure? 1,300 or even 750? It's not going to be physically possible. You don't have a time in a lifetime to try this kind of approaches. So you have plenty of options. But it'd be nice to kind of, when you are desperate, to have something like the heavyweight, like a heavy artillery. At this point, it's only the ECT. So, but you will see what an upstream battle is to convince someone to get ECT. TMS much easier, but what an upstream battle it is to get TMS from the insurances. Because insurances are very sneaky. They say, oh, okay, we'll pay, 85% we'll pay. And then you realize that the 15% is actually $3,000 or $5,000 because it's a 4-week treatment when you go every day. So you see, it's like you are better off moving to Canada to practice medicine. Okay, so I'll see you then next week. It's going to be